So, very exciting. It's finally time for the Ungoro stuff to start rolling out, the reveals to come, and even though it would perhaps be more appropriate to evaluate all the cards when all the cards are out, that is not entirely the purpose of this video. I'm not going to rate the cards yet. I'm going to rate the cards at the end when we have all the information. For now, we get some initial impressions. First up, Swamp King Dred. Some people are laughing at this card, maybe because of the current state of Hunter. However, this card is actually powerful because of the sheer size of it. And also, it isn't as slow as a typical minion. You play it, it immediately has effects on the game because your opponent will want to play minions usually, and when they play them, Swamp King Dred is instantly attacking them. He's that fast and he's that hungry. Swamp King Dred is a full 2 mana less than Ice Howl. Now that's value. And you know what? When you reduce a card's mana cost by 2, it turns out to be pretty good. Now you can't immediately attack something already on the board, which is unfortunate, but you attack future minions. It'll usually call for a 2-for-1 when it comes to minion combat. There's currently no minions in Standard that have the poisonous trait that are commonly played. So that's good news for Dred because it turns out that if your opponent plays something with poisonous, Swamp King Dred is going to attack it and eat it and then get poisoned and then die. So that would be pretty bad. So the cheapest Standard card that'll be still in the format after the rotation is going to be Patient Assassin. So you could have a minion as cheap as 2 mana answer Swamp King Dred. Now fortunately no one is playing Patient Assassin. But what's more concerning is that the newest keyword, Adapt, has the chance to give a minion poisonous. And if they do get poisonous, that could be a cheap answer to Swamp King Dred. Probably more importantly though, is spells can hard remove Swamp King Dred. We're looking for cards like Assassinate, or Blast Crystal Potion, or Siphon Soul. Hard remove, albeit sometimes temporarily, like in the case of Sap, but gaining you a huge mana advantage. I do believe Swamp King Dred will attack stealth minions. It says so on the card. After your opponent plays a minion, attack it. Simple as that. Even if they have stealth, Swamp King Dred pretty smart. You can sniff those stealth guys out. Same as if your opponent has a taunt out. Swamp King Dred doesn't care. Your opponent plays a minion, he's going to attack it. If they play Jade Idol and summon a Jade Golem, Swamp King Dred will not attack it because it plays a minion, not summons a minion. There's currently a few fringe circumstances with Swamp King Dred that I'm not sure on, such as what happens if Swamp King Dred is frozen? Is he still going to attack minions? I'm not sure yet. What happens if your opponent plays Jaraxxus? Well, this is speculation, however, he's worded the same way as Snipe. I imagine if your opponent plays Jaraxxus in response to Swamp King Dred, Dred's gonna take a bite out of Jaraxxus, and that'll be pretty painful. What happens if your opponent plays Dirty Rat and pulls out Swamp King Dred? Well, the battle cry tends to happen first, so Swamp King Dred isn't on the board when Dirty Rat is played, so I imagine Swamp King Dred will not eat the rat. It's Schrodinger's rat right now. Is the rat dead or alive? I have no idea. We won't know until we try him out. But these are all very detailed and not that important interactions. The most important interaction is you can play Swamp King Dred on turn 7 after playing Savannah Highmane. And that's a powerful, very overstated minion on 6 into a very overstated minion on 7. On another super obvious powerful card, at least on paper, we have Arcanologist, which is a 2 mana 2/3 battlecry, draw a card, but not just draw a card, it's draw a specific card from your deck. It draws secrets. This goes to show that Blizzard is trying to push the secret thing and that they recognize that secrets are weak in the game, because not only are you drawing a card, this is like as close as you can get to tutoring for specific cards. The only cards that have done this before are, of course, Mad Scientist before. The only comparison to drawing a card for 2 mana is Loot Hoarder, which is a 2/1 and is a Death Rattle instead of a Battlecry, and Novice Engineer, which is a 2 mana 1/1, which draws a card. This card has an entire 1-2 more stats on it. So what's the problem with this card? Well, it only draws secrets, and secrets probably are bad. In fact, we haven't seen a secret played in a very long time. However, this card does remind me of the aggro tempo mage, which had Ice Block in it, and it strikes me that Arcanologist would work very well with Ice Block as well as with Medivh's Valet. So perhaps we'll see that around. But needless to say, 2 mana, 2/3, draw a card, very powerful. Perhaps you can even add in Mirror Entity into your deck. That used to be played with Mad Scientist. Just turn 2 Arcanologist, turn 3 you have the perfect curve, you play your 3 mana secret. Unfortunately, that means you're spending your entire turn on a card, but it's the card that you drew with Arcanologist. More importantly, it's a low tempo play to play any secret these days. And by the way, have you seen this Cabal Crystal Runner and Cabal Lackey card? Maybe we're going to see a secret mage happen. This requires seeing more cards from Ungoro. It's been stated that Ungoro isn't really focused on secrets, but maybe this is a good setup for a future expansion. Or perhaps there's enough right now. We'll see. Next up, Dinosize. 8 mana, 10/10 charge. Wow. Now, you know what card is comparable to that? King Crush. King Crush is a 9 mana, 8/8 charge. This one is an 8 mana, 9/9 charge if you play it on a Silverhand Recruit. But here's the thing. Most people do kill off your Silverhand Recruits as well because they're afraid of Paladin buffs, especially if Dinosize decks become popular for some reason. So what has to happen? You have to play it on something with charge. You play it with your Stone Tusk Boar, in which case you have a 9 mana Pyroblast, and you get to keep the card that's left over. That's not too bad, but then you realize that you're running like 2 really questionable cards next to each other. Ultimately, this card probably isn't going to cut it in terms of big cards, in my opinion. There's some cases where you can combo this with a commonly run card, so you don't have to put a terrible card like Stone Tusk Boar in your deck. You can put it with Bluegill Warrior. Anything is rotating out. However, that doesn't mean you still can't put the water package into your deck. Your Bluegill Warrior, your Murloc War Leader, and your Finja. So if you still have Bluegill Warriors left around, you can play Bluegill Warrior and Dinosize it for 10 mana. But then you are literally playing a 10 mana for 10/10 charge. And you know what we've seen before? We've seen Ice Howl, which is a 9 mana 10/10 charge, which admittedly can't attack face, but if you're playing this like 8 mana card, you're probably a control deck, and you're probably going to want to attack minions. You can also, by the way, play it on the card that I revealed, Silent Knight. It'll keep the Divine Shield, and Silent Knight is a card that has stealth and has Divine Shield. If you set it to 10/10, that's incredible. Ultimately, I don't think it's still going to work, but hey, use for Silent Knight. By the way, did you know that Silent Knight is... Unfortunately, Silent Knight is rotating out. Womp womp. Some people have stated about the huge potential that Dinosize has with Wind Fury minions, but here's the thing. Wind Fury minions are typically statted poorly, so that your opponent's minions will usually be able to trade up into it. With Adapt, you can adapt into Wind Fury, however that's not guaranteed, and not only that, if you adapt into Wind Fury, you're not adapting into higher stats, which means your minion is not only a very high priority target to remove, but is pretty weak relative to its cost, probably. So, Dinosize, probably no good. Tortollan Shellraiser. Now, I'm actually doing this reveal a little bit later than some, so I've actually had the chance to look at some of the reveals. The reason why I'm doing this reveal a little bit later is because I was at South by Southwest in the tournament. This card got a surprisingly large amount of love. This card is seen to be the Twilight Guardian replacement, but 2/6 is a lot worse than 3/6. There are a lot of minions with 3 health. Yes, it does count as 1 minion for the quest. Yes, it is theoretically a 4 mana 3/7 taunt. Now here's the downsides of it. If I want to go against it, it's a 4 mana 2/6. And the Tortollan Shellraiser reminds me of another turtle we've seen before, Oasis Snapjaw. Oasis Snapjaw is 4 mana 2/7. This card's goodness is going to depend a lot on the priest ability to curve out on turn 1, 2, 3, and 4. Priests have an excellent turn 3, Cabal Talon Priest. However, currently their turn 1s and 2s are kind of questionable. On 1 they have Mistress of Mixtures if they're looking to do a Death Rattle theme, And right now, what priests are missing is that elusive 2-mana card. I think it's going to boil down to whether or not priests are getting a good 2-mana card. So we kind of hold off judgment on this one until we see whether or not priest gets a good 2-mana card. Okay, Sherazin, Corpse Flower. We can compare this card to Paladin Shredder in the best case scenario and say that this card is insane because you get your 5/3 and then it will come back not immediately, well, possibly immediately, and then you're getting another 5/3. And not only that, it doesn't have to just come back once. You might be able to get it to come back twice. If you've played against Miracle Rogue before, you certainly know that it's quite possible for your opponent to play 4 cards in a turn between Preparation and the Counterfeit Coin. Doing this is not that unusual. And doing this twice, not that unusual either. It's one of those cards which you really want to draw early, and you'll keep in your opening hand. It will take up a board slot when it goes dormant and becomes the seed, the flower seed, but that potential to get like free extra 5/3s, like not free because the first one was kind of weak, but free in the future, that's pretty powerful. I actually see potential in the card. And not just potential, I see it as potentially Finja level good. And yes, if you play N'Zoth, you are going to get multiple copies of the Sherazin. I'm just going to say that based on the Shredder comparison, which isn't even that big a stretch, this card could be great. Lakkari Sacrifice. When I first looked at it, I was kind of meh on it. I was like, man, it's so hard to discard 6 cards. And with the current Disco Zoos out there, you usually run 2 Darkshire Librarian, you run 2 Soulfire, and you run 2 Doomguard, which means the maximum amount of cards you can discard a game is 8. And remember, with Disco Zoo, you are even typically not discarding cards. You usually want to top deck Doomguard, and you want to top deck Soulfire, and you want to play them without discarding a card. Now, Lakkari Sacrifice encourages you not to take the route where you try to cheat the discard by not having a hand. Instead, you actively want to discard cards. So the first thing that I'm going to posit here is that you're actually going to run this card not in the standard Disco Zoo, but perhaps a new type of Warlock, which is mid-range or even mid-range control, and you are purposely going to discard your cards, and sometimes you're going to discard important things, and you're going to cry about it, but wah wah. You're still going to run your Silverware Golems, and you're still going to run your Malchezaar's Imps, of course. Now, the important thing is, discarding 6 cards is very difficult. It's the equivalent of discarding 12 mana worth of life tap and 12 health worth of life tap. That's pretty difficult to do. Here's the thing, when you're playing these cards that discard cards, you are getting usually pretty good value. And this Nether Portal is actually absolutely insane. I wouldn't even have considered this type of deck if not for the insanity of Nether Portal. Now the question is, why run this card over Jaraxxus if you're playing a control deck anyways? The concept is you can actually get more value out of Nether Portal faster than Jaraxxus, possibly. You're paying for the Jaraxxus 9 mana up front, and the Nether Portal you only have to pay 5 mana for. And then you immediately get the 2 Imps on that turn, whereas as Jaraxxus you usually can't press the Inferno button after Emperor Thaurissan rotates out immediately. Each time you press the Inferno button on Jaraxxus, not only does it cost you 2 mana, you're only getting 2 more stats than Lakkari Sacrifice's Nether Portal Imps. Jaraxxus also you get a weapon, but Lakkari Sacrifice's Nether Portal you still get to keep your life tap, so you can still tap for more stuff, which you're going to need after discarding so many cards. The ultimate question that we're going to ask is, does Lakkari Sacrifice, does the entire deck outvalue, can it have more potential than Jaraxxus? And I see a little bit of glimmer of potential here. So that brings us to Lakkari Felhound, which obviously combos with the previous. Easily comparable to the 5 mana 5/7 Doomguard charge card. Suppose that it didn't have the cost of discarding cards. How much could you reasonably cost it at and not have it be OP? Would a 6 mana 5/7 be too powerful with charge? It probably would be. So I think the reasonable amount of mana for a 5/7 charge is somewhere around 7 mana. So basically, discarding 2 random cards can be seen as like increasing the mana cost of a card by 1 per random card you discard. Whereas Soulfire's discard cost is obviously worth it because 2 mana deal 4. Dark Bomb was played and that was 2 mana deal 3, so Soulfire, that's really good. And Doomguard, we could see like a 7 mana 5/7 charge. Yeah, that could be pretty good, but most importantly, usually don't discard the cards with the Felhound. I'm not as impressed by this card as a lot of people are because 6 mana 3/8 is in the game and it's Ancient of Blossoms and it's a terrible card. Yeah, it's 4 mana 3/8 and it's like, wow, that's insane. But is a 4 mana 3/8 really that insane? It's just 3 health more than Senjin Shieldmaster, a card that isn't even being played. And a card that you certainly wouldn't see in Zoo. We're gonna see whether or not there's more discard synergy. Right now, I am skeptical about the viability of this Lakkari quest. If you're running a mid-range control Warlock, why not just run Jiraxis? But that's the point of not knowing the entire set yet. So we hold off judgment on this and say that it has some potential. The quest reward for Lakkari sacrifice is clearly really good. It's Jiraxis level good. Explore Ungoro. It's a warrior card, and it's meant to be kind of like Renounced Darkness, which replaces your deck with copies of Discover a card. We've seen brawls of this before. It turns out that discovering a card is actually pretty bad. I mean, if it was 0 mana discover a card, it might be viable, but this copy discover a card costs 1 mana. It's the equivalent of why not every deck runs I Know a Guy, or why not every deck runs Journey Below. It's certainly why people don't run Finders Keepers, because that's a double cost. Basically, paying 1 extra mana to put a card into your deck, and you might not even get a good card, is pretty bad. It's clearly a fun card, and that's okay. But it is actually worse than Renounced Darkness, I'm going to say. You can't even do that many memes with it, because as a warrior card, and as you are the warrior class, discovering always allows you to just discover cards in your class. There is an idea, at least, that suppose you use this in like an Elise fashion, where you are a control deck and you put 1 copy of Explore and Grow in your deck, and you plan to use it in the late game so that you transform your deck into better cards later. Well, here's the thing. Unlike Elise, it doesn't transform your hand, and unlike Elise, you actually pay a card instead of getting like some amount of benefit with it, a 4 mana 3/5. I'll go as far as to say that even if Explore and Grow were a 0 mana card, it would still be bad. It's a fun card, but I think you could have made a fun card which is at least a little bit better. Or perhaps if the Discover a card were 0 mana. That would also be interesting. But no. Oh, okay, I see. So that's why you have to discover a card. Because if you drew Gadgetzan Auctioneer and then you played Explore and Grow, that could arguably be a bit too powerful. So, alright, fine. I understand why Discover a card has to be 1 mana. So I would argue that Explore and Grow probably should just cost 0 mana. And now we see a card that is near and dear to my heart. I'm famous for playing a Hungry Crab, like way about 3 years ago.
Possible. He has like Arcane Explosion, and he's like, what?
He is actually deciding to trade the Armani Berserker.
Yeah, I like this a lot.
And popping the shield with this Void Walker. Yep. I would have definitely popped the shield with the Void Walker. I wouldn't necessarily have.
Oh my god! Are you seeing what I'm saying? Really?
Oh my goodness.
I can't believe this.
I don't believe this. I need to look at the
Amazing.
chat right now. What the hell are they saying? Raise your kappas right now.
Wow.
Oh my god! Artur, he can't believe it! He can't believe it. He looks at us, he looks at Trump, and he's like, no fucking way.
This just happened.
Oh my god! Trump is a genius. I cannot believe it.
This is his secret
Oh.
deck. This is what he was holding
Oh
on.
my god!
Wow.
Oh Jesus!
I have to be honest, I'm really like impressed right now.
Wow!
You have to get props, mad
I-
props to Trump for this.
Home.
Artur
This
is
is
getting, he
unreal.
doesn't even know what to
This is
do.
unreal.
He doesn't know what to do. He's looking at Trump more than he's looking at his screen. He's not even thinking about plays.
This is basically Hungry Crab, except for pirates, and it couldn't have come as soon enough. Unlike the Hungry Crab, which is only a 1 mana 1/2, A 2-mana 2/3 stat line is way better. Destroys pirate and then it can become a 2-mana 3/4. That is so ridiculously strong when you play it against the pirate. You're not that excited when you kill a 1/1, either Patches or N'Zoth's first mate, but you are excited when you kill Bloodsteel Raider, Bloodsteel Cultist, or even Naga Corsair. I have, like I mentioned, had the opportunity to look at some reviews first, and Kibler calls this unfortunate design because it's a heavy-handed approach to correcting the meta. Alright, so pirates are dominating. We're just going to print a card that kills pirates. I'm going to present a counter opinion to this. I love hate cards. If a card like Ooze is okay, which is more general hate, then a card that really targets a specific card, like that is genius. That's coming from someone who loves Hungry Crab, as someone who played it. Why are hate cards good for the game? Well, hate cards allow you to really take down a specific archetype only if you have specifically prepared for that. Furthermore, it has interesting tournament applications. Picture this kind of conquest tournament situation. Pirate Warrior is agreed upon as being the strongest deck. Everyone's always going to bring Pirate Warrior. That's actually the case right now. So you have this clever young upstart who's going to try as hard as he can to counter Pirate Warrior. He puts in 2 copies of Golakka Crawler into every single deck. He puts in 2 copies of Acidic Swamp Ooze into every single deck. I think that's awesome. Now I'm going to respond to the people who say, oh wow, this is going to be a buff to pirate decks. You can eat your patches. And they're really dumb. You'll play a 2-mana 2/3 in a Pirate Warrior deck? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. You are literally just collecting your 1/1 patches into a 2/3. It's very similar to Voidwalker in that respect. Never played. It's actually worse than River Crocolisk in your pirate deck because you mandatorily have to destroy a pirate. So suppose you start off with like Fiery War Axe and you play Bloodsail Raider, and then you draw Golakka Crawler, and your Bloodsail Raider is like still on the board. You can't even play Golakka Crawler because you'll have to destroy your pirate. In the best case, which is you eat exactly N'Zoth's first mate or Patches, you get your +1/+1 and you lose a 1/1, which means you have like not really even gained anything. If you're actually playing Pirate Warrior and you're aiming to counter Pirate Warrior, then okay, fine. But actually, I would recommend you play Ooze instead of Golakka Crawler because of the case that you have to eat your own pirate. That actually is a severe limitation. Furthermore, the 2-mana 3/2 stat line is better than a 2-mana 2/3 stat line for an aggressive deck. For what I'm going to say for obvious reasons, but just because people think that Golakka Crawler might be like an interesting addition to a Pirate Warrior deck, I'm going to spell out why a 3/2 is better than a 2/3 in an aggressive deck. It turns out that if you hit your opponent's face for 3 instead of 2, that's a good thing. Anyways, I think Golakka Crawler is a great design. It's possible that the Pirate Warrior meta will continue to rage at some points, and then it's the clever player who understands and reads the meta who's going to put in Golakka Crawler into their deck, and they can reap huge benefits. We hail our savior, the crab. It's amazing. I'll also quickly speak to the possibility of it being a decent card in Hunter with Beasts and in Beast Druid, because it has a Beast tag as an added benefit. At one point, way back, 3 years ago, there weren't good enough cards that you ran River Crocolisk in Hunter, just so you had more targets to Handmaster. So 2-mana 2/3 Beast, not even that bad. Alright, Tar Creeper. This is another card that I will admit is actually better than the Golakka Crab. It is also a hate card, and by Jove, it has been far too long since we have had strong anti-aggro hate cards. Now, funny that I should say that because in the last expansion, there were 3 printed. Mistress of Mixtures, Friendly Bartender, Second-Rate Bruiser. And I love that because having anti-aggro options are great. This last meta, people were bringing 4 aggro decks to tournaments, and some people were bringing a full anti-aggro lineup, such as myself. I'm not bitter or anything. And we still lost. Because by the nature of aggro decks, sometimes they draw well and you don't have enough answers, and then they just run you over anyways. Currently on Vicious Syndicate, Pirate Warrior is sporting like about a 55% win rate against most decks, and only against the most dedicated of anti-aggro decks. Like, it has a slight win percentage disadvantage. Like, we're not even talking about 40%, we're talking about like 48% win rate. So what do I want to see? I want to see anti-aggro cards crush aggro to the ground. I want to see Tar Creeper. Tar Creeper is great. Against aggro decks, it's a 3 mana, 3/5 taunt. It is basically Ascension for 3 mana. Some people might make the argument, why not just play a second rate Bruiser? That's a 3 mana 4/5. Well, here's the thing, even against aggro decks, you couldn't really consistently play your second rate Bruiser on 3, even with patches. Tar Creeper is able to be played like for 3 mana every single time. You might make the argument, but your opponent can just trade into it however they want. You're not dictating the trades, they are. Well, it turns out 3 attack is good enough to generally kill stuff, and 5 health is generally good enough to survive an attack. Ancient Watcher was a 2 mana 4/5, and that was the hallmark of a defensive card because it literally said can't attack on it. Now, why is this card better than Ancient Watcher? It's because you don't have to combo Ancient Watcher with stuff. Not to mention it has an elemental tag to it. Now, we haven't actually seen any elemental synergy yet, but that's probably going to be useful for something. So, this direction, I think, is great for the game. I think people are tired of having no answer for aggro. Between Pirate Crab and Tar Creeper, this is going to usher in a golden age of Hearthstone where you can actually defeat aggro and the meta will slow down. I know we say that every single time, but this time, without seeing like, you know, absurd 1 mana drops that are printed to be revealed, this time I'm right. This time it's going to not, this time the meta will slow down. Aggro decks will still possibly be viable because people will eventually not run Tar Creeper and Golakka Pirate Crab when aggro fades away. So with this possibly slower meta, we're gonna trailblaze a path, and it's gonna be led by Elise the Trailblazer. So Elise the Trailblazer is a very exciting card for people who love control-oriented cards in the late game. And it's a 5 mana 5/5, which Elise has buffed up. Wow, 5 mana 5/5. That's actually a decent card, especially with Azure Drake on, and generally not many cards being good in the 5 slot. You get to shuffle a sealed Ungrow pack into your deck. What does that mean? It means you add a 2 mana card, which is an Ungrow pack, and when you play that 2 mana spell, you're going to get 5 cards, with 1 guaranteed to be at least epic, and it has been said that you're going to get, on average, 1 legendary. Which means sometimes you'll get 2, sometimes you'll get 0, sometimes you'll get 1, but on average, 1. Now here's the good news. Originally I thought, wow, that's going to suck getting those legendaries, because you have like a 9 out of 23, because I believe there are 23 legendaries in Ungrow, chance of getting a quest. But good news, you can't get quests. So that means when you get a legendary, you're going to get 1 non-quest, which will probably be a good one since most of the legendaries we've seen are late game cards. And Elise the Trailblazer, that's a good card to get again as well. If you get Elise off of Elise and you're in a control v control game, the amount of value is insane. Now, depending on how good the cards from Ungrow are, is also going to depend. It's going to determine how good Elise is. This card can be most readily compared to White Eyes. So, what's better, 5 mana 10/10 or 5 cards? And that's kind of arguable. You can also say that White Eyes was in Shaman, and that kind of hindered it because Shaman, like, I'm sure a lot of classes would have loved to run Storm Guardian in their deck. So another good thing about Elise is in control v control matchups, every card could matter if it comes down to fatigue. And Elise the Trailblazer does shuffle 1 card into your deck, which means you will fatigue 1 card slower. Now, the downside to Elise the Trailblazer is twofold. 1, she's not great against aggressive decks because she'll just be a 5 mana 5/5 and it'll be too late to draw your Ungrow pack. Two, arguably it's not as good against Jade decks because Jade outdoes you in the late game. Jade decks didn't really care about your life total, so you actually watered down your control deck quite a bit by putting in Reno Jackson and having one-ofs in your deck. So without Reno Jackson, and this is a realization that I only recently had, control decks will have a more favorable win rate against Jade decks. Furthermore on that, if there is fewer aggro to worry about, you can put in more cards that are anti-Jade. So I actually think that this situation will work itself out. I am very hopeful with the cards that have been shown here, and I do believe you can currently make a control deck that beats a Jade deck. The main problem with that is you would get run over by aggro decks so hard your head would spin. If you want to be a percentage-based player and you want to play the proper deck, I feel like without Reno and by possibly having to worry less about aggro, you could come up with some really cool decks. I'm very hopeful about this expansion, and I love the cards that were revealed.